So lesson 2, we are talking about exponents and how we simplify various exponents. And then we'll be solving some circle problems. So while I pick up your papers, you can start writing down the left-hand side on these formulas and thinking about what you remember of what those are each equal to. So can anybody tell me what a negative exponent does? Or what do we do when we see a negative exponent in a problem? Does anybody remember what we do, how we simplify those? What are you thinking on that, Chloe? Explain. To the So we can move, another way of saying it, and you're being much more formally correct, which I love, but to make it maybe more understandable for some, I sometimes call it the upstairs downstairs rule. If you have a negative exponent, it can change from upstairs to downstairs or downstairs to upstairs, and you change the exponent from negative to positive. Or if it's positive, and for some reason you want to move it upstairs or downstairs, it's fine to do that. The number part stays the same, but the positive becomes a negative. So if I had, for example, x to the minus 5, that's the same as 1 over x to the 5th. Or if I had x to the 7th, that's the same as 1 over x to the minus 7. Or if I have the minus 7 in the denominator, I can move that to the numerator and make it a positive 7. Yes, Milo? Anytime you need them, they're over there. You guys keep an eye on that. Some people write large, some people write small. Does anybody remember what x to the 0 is? And what are we going to have on that, Nitsa? Anything to the 0 is 1, except 0 to the 0 is undefined. But everything else, parentheses to the 0 is 1. I can have a really long parentheses with a bunch of things in it. But to the 0, it becomes 1. And you don't need to write the things in blue in your formula list. Even if it is a negative number, but you have to be a little bit careful. Is the negative sign getting the 0 or not? So negative 7 to the 0 is parentheses to the 0. It is 1. Minus 7 to the 0. There's no parentheses here. The exponent just goes on the last thing that was written or typed, so the parentheses, the 7. So this is the opposite of 7 to the 0. It is the opposite of 1. Good question. Anybody else? What do we do when we have same base, 2 different exponents, and they get multiplied? And anytime you get a little bit confused, you can always think about an easy example in the margin. X squared x cubed would be xx times xxx. How many x's altogether? So x to the, everybody? 5th. So what do we do in general with those exponents? Add them. 2 plus 3 is 5. What if we have 1 in the numerator and 1 in the denominator? Who remembers what we do with those? Milo? Explain. Okay, we would subtract them. That one is top heavy. There are 3 extras of the x's in the numerator. What would have happened if it had been x cubed over x to the 6th? Somebody different. What would be happening in that case, Layden? I could still subtract 3 minus 6 and say x to the minus 3. Or what if I didn't want the minus exponent? What would that one become in that particular case, John? One over x cubed. This one's bottom heavy. If I wrote them all out, I could cancel 3 of them, and I'd have 3 extras in the denominator and the placeholder of 1 in the numerator. And the last one of these, what if I have one base with 2 exponents? Here I had the base written twice. Each had an exponent, and I added. What if I have 2 exponents on one base? Who remembers what we do there? Britton, you remember? And let's keep eyes up here rather than my computer, if you don't mind. Yes. We're going to multiply them in that case. So if this was x cubed squared, that would be x cubed times x cubed, or xxx times xxx. So 6 of them all together. So hopefully that's all coming back to everybody. And then the rest is using this on some practice problems and then some circle problems. Questions with the formulas? Does anybody need me to wait, or do we all have these written down? Keep this out if you need to look at it as we're doing the practice problems. So, and this builds on what Naomi was asking about a little while ago. What if we have a minus sign in there? It wasn't exactly what she asked, but I got into that with explaining some things in there. This has no parentheses. So this -2 is only on what comes right before. It's on the 4. It is not on the minus sign. So in fact, if it helps you, you could even write that in to remind you that the minus sign does not get the -2. So this one becomes minus. And then what do I do with 4 to the -2? Who can help me with that, Abby? And what is 4 squared? So this becomes -1/16. Now, whenever I have a minus sign, I like to first get rid of the minus exponents. So I look at this one, and I have a negative in the denominator. So I bump it up to the numerator as 4 to a +2, and everybody shout out, what's that? Now this one looks a lot like what we had up here, except it's got a second minus sign in there. This time, the whole -4 is going to get the -2. This is not. So that minus sign out in front stays a minus sign. This becomes 1 over that whole parentheses squared. So if I put a -4 down here, what is a -4 times -4, everybody? So this one becomes -1 over 16. Same answer that we had on the first one, just a little bit different reason for getting there. And what about this one, which looks like what I started with, except this time the minus sign is inside the parentheses. So this minus is going to mean we move the whole thing down to the denominator. So I'm going to put the whole parentheses in the denominator squared. The whole parentheses is a -4. So everybody shout out, what's my answer? Positive or negative? Perfect, because the negative times the negative is positive. Any questions with that? Okay, now let's do some where it's variables that we need to clean up. I can end up with only one x in this whole thing. It might be numerator, it might be denominator. I can end up with only one y. numerator or denominator, but not both. Whatever letters I have, I can have each one time. I do best usually if I kind of change everything to positives, but there are a lot of orders you can do this in. We are also going to always write final answers with only positive exponents. Back of the book may do both, so just like the pi ones, wait and we'll check them in class. The reason for that is most of our brains, or at least the teacher's brains here, it makes more sense with a positive exponent in there. If you give me a negative one, I know what to do with it, but I'm always typing, oh, that really is here with a positive one. So we're just going to write our final answers with positives. So if I start with my y's, this y is good. This y is good. So maybe I'll go ahead and put those together as y to the 6th. But this one, I'm going to put downstairs as a y cubed. And this one, I'm going to put upstairs as another y to the 6th. And this y to the 10th can just stay downstairs because it was a positive exponent. I'm not done. I've still got to put all of those together, but that's probably what I do first step. I don't want to do too many mental math or I make a mistake. With the x's, I've got the x to the 4th, and then I'm going to put the x to the 10th downstairs. I'm going to put this x cubed upstairs, and I'm going to keep this x squared downstairs. I think I got them all right. Did I miss anything in there? Then, if I put my y's together, I have y to the 12th in the numerator, y to the 13th in the denominator, which is going to be just a y in the denominator. And if I put my x's together, I have how many in the numerator? And how many in the denominator? And how many extras and where? Where do I put it with the positive exponent if I put x to the 7th over x to the 12th and simplify that part? Michael? Perfect. And then I've got to have something in the numerator as a placeholder, so a 1. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, so we're going to start with these ones that are on the outside of the parentheses. So parentheses to the 0, everybody. So that whole thing becomes a 1, so I don't have to worry about it. Then what I can do is I am going to take this whole parentheses to the -2. So I'm going to put it down here squared. Another way I could do it, but we'll go ahead with that. And so this whole parentheses was an x to the -3y. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Does that much make sense so far? Okay, now I need to square this. So I am going to multiply my exponents, x to the -3 times 2, y to the 1 times 2. And normally I wouldn't write that separately, so I'm just going to write x to the -6, y squared. And then let's go ahead and put the x to the 4th and x cubed together, x to the 7th. And let's add. -8 plus 2 is -6. And a 1 up there. So now, if I put my -6 plus 7 together, how many do I have? Just one of them. So I have 1 over x. And if I put the y squared times y to the -6, I can add those. What's 2 minus 6? -4 in the denominator, so let's put it in the numerator. As a y to the 4th. Does that look right to everybody? Any questions with exponents? My main advice is be careful, and there's a whole bunch of orders you can do. You can add the positive and the negative if they're both in the numerator, or you can put the negative into the denominator, whichever way seems easier to you on that problem. And I kind of jumped back and forth on some of those. Okay, let's do a circle problem. And these are ones that are kind of two-step and sometimes even two formulas in there. So this one starts us off with the area of a circle is 49 pi. So let's write down the formula. Who can tell me formula for area of a circle? Khadijah? So pi r squared. Substitute in whatever we are given. We are given area is 49 pi. Can substitute on the left or the right of the equal sign. This one has to go here, 49 pi is pi r squared. Let's see what we're supposed to find. We're supposed to find the circumference. Who can tell me the formula for the circumference? Anybody who hasn't answered something yet today? Lucas, you remember circumference formula? So 2 pi r or pi d, but they don't tell me a d, and this formula's got an r, so I think r is going to be the better one. I need r to plug in there. All I know is that this is true over here. So what if I clean it up, divide both sides by pi? If r squared is 49, do I know what r has to be? Everybody shout it out. 7. Normally, if we have r squared is 49, we say r is either plus or minus 7. But why can the radius not be -7? Naomi? It's a distance, can't have a negative distance, so we're only going to worry about 7. So now we can plug that into times pi times the 7, must simplify completely before we use a calculator. So 14 pi centimeters. Anybody have your calculator handy? Punch that in and let's see what we get. And Milo, what'd you come up with? And circumference is linear units. So just centimeters. Any questions with what we've done today? All right, I'm going to assign some homework ones to do first so that I can take a look at them.